Helena Blavatsky didn't die quietly. Before she passed, she left a terrifying warning about invisible forces keeping humanity imprisoned, forces she called the true rulers of this world. You didn't find this video by accident. There's a reason you feel something is fundamentally wrong with the reality around you, why you have that constant sensation that you're living a life that isn't completely your own. Millions of people around the world wake up every day with an inexplicable restlessness, a feeling that they're trapped in a system that drains their vital energy. You know this feeling. It's that impression that no matter how hard you try, there's always an invisible force pulling you back into routine, into forgetfulness, into an automated life where you function but don't truly live. Today you're going to discover the shocking truth that Helena Blavatsky found in her studies of the most ancient Gnostic texts. She discovered that 7 specific forces exist, which the ancients called ARCHONS, operating as invisible guardians of a control system so sophisticated that most people don't even realize they're being manipulated. These forces don't use physical violence. They're much smarter than that. They keep you trapped through comfort, routine, constant distraction, and especially through forgetting who you really are. What I'm about to reveal will explain why you feel disconnected from your true essence, why it seems like there's a veil between you and your most authentic reality. Helena Blavatsky warned that these forces act as soul jailers, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. They sincerely believe they're maintaining order, but they're actually preventing humanity's spiritual awakening. You'll understand how each of these 7 forces operates in your daily life, how they influence your thoughts, your desires, and even your dreams. More importantly, you'll learn to recognize when you're under their influence and how to free yourself from this invisible prison that keeps billions of people spiritually asleep. Prepare yourself for a revelation that will forever change how you see your life, your choices, and your true potential. The knowledge I'm sharing now has been kept secret for millennia, transmitted only to true seekers of spiritual freedom. This isn't just information, it's a key to unlock the chains that most people don't even know they're wearing. The first force that Helena Blavatsky identified in the Gnostic texts is what the ancients called Yaldabaoth, but we can call it the architect of golden illusion. This is the primordial force that created the system we all live in, a system that appears divine on the surface but is actually a crude imitation of true spiritual order. This force isn't malevolent in the traditional sense. It genuinely believes it's divine, that it's the ultimate authority. It's like a prison warden who really thinks he's offering the best possible shelter to the prisoners. The architect of golden illusion created a world that functions through rigid hierarchies, where obedience is rewarded and spiritual curiosity is discouraged. You recognize this influence when you feel internal pressure to conform to structures that don't make sense to your soul, but seem unquestionable to your mind. It's that inner voice saying, "Things have always been this way and always will be. Don't question, just obey. The system knows what's best for you." This force manifests through institutions that promise security in exchange for your spiritual freedom. It operates through fear of questioning apparently benevolent authorities, through the feeling that you need intermediaries to connect with the divine, through the belief that your salvation comes from outside rather than within. Helena Blavatsky realized this force feeds on ignorance, especially ignorance of our own divine nature. When you forget that you carry a spark of the divine within yourself, you automatically seek that divinity in external authorities, strengthening the architect's power. The antidote to this influence is remembrance. When you remember your true spiritual origin, when you recognize that divinity isn't distant, but dwells in your own being, this force's power begins to dissolve. It's not a battle won through fighting, but through awakening. Comment which city you're watching from so we can see how far this wisdom is reaching and touching hearts that are ready to awaken. But there's something even more subtle operating through this first force, something it uses to keep you distracted while consolidating its control over your perception of reality. The second force Helena Blavatsky discovered in ancient texts is what we can call the Lord of False Hierarchies. This force works intimately with the architect of illusion, but its specialty is creating power systems that seem legitimate and even sacred, but actually serve to keep souls away from their true inner authority. You feel this force's influence whenever you seek external validation instead of trusting your inner wisdom. It's that feeling that you need approval from other people to make important decisions about your own life. It's the belief that there are people spiritually superior who know better than you what's right for your path. This force is extremely seductive because it offers structure and apparent security. It whispers, "Follow these rules and you'll be saved. Obey this authority and you'll find peace. There's a right way and you need guides to find it." It sounds reasonable, even spiritual, but it's a golden trap. The Lord of False Hierarchies manifests through any system that convinces you that you're not capable of having a direct connection with the divine. It might be an authoritarian religion, it might be a spiritual leader who positions himself as a necessary intermediary. It might even be an inner voice that convinces you that you're not evolved enough to trust your own perception. Helena Blavatsky realized this force feeds on spiritual low self-esteem. The more you doubt your own capacity for spiritual discernment, the more power you hand over to external authorities. It's a vicious cycle. You seek external guidance because you don't trust yourself, and the more you depend on external guidance, the less you develop your inner confidence. Liberation from this influence begins when you recognize that your connection with the divine is direct and needs no intermediaries. Your intuition, when purified by sincerity and genuine search for truth, is a more reliable guide than any external authority. This doesn't mean rejecting all guidance, but it means developing discernment to distinguish between guidance that strengthens your spiritual autonomy and guidance that creates dependency. And now you need to know about the third force, which operates in a completely different and perhaps even more dangerous way. The third force Helena Blavatsky identified is what the Gnostics called Sabaoth, but we can name it the guardian of sacred wrath. This force is particularly treacherous because it uses our natural thirst for justice against ourselves, transforming our legitimate indignation into rage that keeps us trapped in cycles of conflict and revenge. You know this influence intimately. It's that anger that arises when you see injustices in the world, but instead of motivating you toward constructive actions, it consumes you with resentment and desire for punishment. It's the voice that whispers, "They deserve to suffer for what they did." The only language they understand is force. You have the right to revenge. The guardian of sacred wrath doesn't promote uncontrolled rage. It's much more sophisticated. It promotes indignation that seems morally justified, hatred that disguises itself as justice, violence that presents itself as defense of good. It's the force behind every holy war, every moral crusade, every movement that uses destructive methods in the name of apparently noble causes. This force feeds on your frustration with the world as it is. The more you focus on what's wrong, what needs to be destroyed, what deserves punishment, the more energy you offer to this influence. It convinces you that you're a warrior of light, while actually keeping you trapped in conflict vibrations that prevent your spiritual awakening. Helena Blavatsky realized this force is particularly active in people who have sincere hearts and want to make a difference in the world. It takes that pure motivation and distorts it, transforming builders into destroyers, healers into fighters, love into war. The antidote to this force isn't passivity or acceptance of injustice. It's the transformation of anger into active compassion. When you learn to respond to the world's injustices not with hatred, but with actions that promote healing and growth, you remove all power this influence has over your life. True spiritual strength doesn't come from the ability to destroy what is evil, but from the ability to plant what is good. When you focus your energy on creating instead of destroying, on healing instead of punishing, on loving instead of hating, you become invincible against this third force. But prepare yourself, because the next force we'll explore operates in a much more seductive and pleasurable way. The fourth force revealed in Helena Blavatsky's studies is what the ancient texts called Adonaios, but we can call it the master of golden seductions. This force is perhaps the hardest to recognize because it doesn't cause direct suffering. On the contrary, it offers pleasure, beauty, comfort, and everything that seems to make life more enjoyable. You experience this influence whenever you feel your happiness depends on external circumstances. It's that feeling that you'll be complete when you get that job, that relationship, that house, that recognition. It's the subtle belief that spiritual fulfillment can be found through sensory experiences or material achievements. The master of golden seductions doesn't offer you bad things. It offers genuinely good things, but convinces you that these good things are the source of your happiness It's responsible for every form of pleasure dependency, whether through food, sex, entertainment, shopping, praise, or any other experience that gives you a temporary sense of satisfaction. This force is extremely intelligent. It knows you have legitimate needs for beauty, pleasure, and joy. So it offers distorted versions of these needs, versions that give you momentary relief, but leave you always wanting more. It's like a thirst that never completely quenches, no matter how much you drink. Helena Blavatsky realized this force operates through what she called the illusion of form. It convinces you that external reality is more real and more important than internal reality. The more you seek satisfaction in the world of forms, the more you forget the satisfaction that exists naturally in your own being. The result is an infinite cycle of seeking. You get something you want, feel pleasure for a while, but soon the feeling wears off and you need to seek the next thing. It's an emotional roller coaster that keeps your attention constantly turned outward, preventing you from discovering the source of joy that exists within you. Liberation from this influence doesn't come through denial of pleasure or beauty, but through recognition that true satisfaction is independent of external circumstances. When you learn to find fulfillment in your own being, you can enjoy life's pleasures without depending on them for your happiness. And now we come to an even more subtle force that operates directly through your mind and thoughts. The fifth force Helena Blavatsky discovered in Gnostic texts is known as Elios, but let's call it the architect of mental confusion. This force is responsible for transforming your natural capacity for direct knowing into a complex web of thoughts, doubts, and analyses that take you away from simple truth. You recognize this influence when you get lost in overthinking, when your mind produces infinite theories and explanations that only leave you more confused. It's that feeling that the more you study spirituality, the more complicated everything seems. The more you look for answers, the more questions appear. The architect of mental confusion doesn't prevent you from seeking knowledge. On the contrary, it encourages you to seek more and more information, theories, systems, and techniques. But it ensures that all this knowledge is filtered through an analytical mind that never manages to reach definitive conclusions. This force manifests through the tendency to intellectualize spiritual experiences, instead of simply living them. It convinces you that you need to understand everything mentally before you can experience spiritually. It's like trying to explain the taste of an apple to someone who's never eaten one. You can talk for hours, but the person will only truly understand when they experience it. Helena Blavatsky realized this force feeds on the belief that the mind is the most reliable tool for knowing spiritual truth. But the mind, by its very nature, can only know through comparisons, categories, and concepts. Spiritual reality, on the other hand, is direct, immediate, and needs no explanations. The more you try to understand spirituality only with the mind, the more you strengthen this fifth force. It keeps you busy with concepts about God instead of allowing you to experience God directly. It replaces wisdom with information, understanding with analysis, experience with theory. Liberation from this influence comes through developing intuition and direct knowing. When you learn to trust your ability to know without thinking, to understand without analyzing, to experience without explaining, you free yourself from the mental prison this force creates. This doesn't mean abandoning the mind, but it means using it as a tool instead of letting it be the commander of your spiritual experience. But now we need to talk about a force that operates through your dreams and altered states of consciousness. The sixth force identified by Helena Blavatsky in ancient texts is called Aphios, but we can name it the weaver of mystical illusions. This force is particularly dangerous for spiritual seekers because it works through false mystical experiences, creating the sensation of spiritual progress while actually keeping you trapped in more subtle layers of illusion. You may have encountered this influence if you've had spiritual experiences that seemed profound in the moment, but afterward didn't result in real transformation in your life. These are those dazzling visions, those altered states of consciousness, those feelings of ecstasy that make you feel special and evolved, but don't produce lasting changes in your character or your capacity to love. The weaver of mystical illusions is a master at creating experiences that satisfy your thirst for transcendence without actually taking you beyond the limitations of your personality. It offers glimpses of elevated states of consciousness, but always within the limits of a controlled system that doesn't truly threaten your prison. This force manifests through spiritual practices that have become addictive instead of liberating. It might be the constant search for new workshops, new gurus, new techniques, always looking for the next transcendent experience. It might be obsession with psychic phenomena, past lives, channelings, or any other type of experience that makes you feel different from normal people. Helena Blavatsky realized this force feeds on spiritual ego, that part of you that wants to feel special, evolved, chosen. It offers experiences that feed this ego, creating a subtle form of spiritual superiority that's actually another kind of prison. The danger of this force is that it can keep you busy with spiritual experiences for decades, without you realizing you're not actually growing. It's like a person who keeps watching movies about mountain climbing instead of actually climbing mountains. It might be interesting and even inspiring, but it doesn't develop the muscles or endurance necessary for the real journey. Liberation from this influence comes through focusing on the practical fruits of spirituality instead of extraordinary experiences. When you evaluate your spiritual progress by the quality of your love, the stability of your inner peace, the depth of your compassion, you become immune to the mystical seductions of this sixth force. True spirituality manifests in daily life, not just in altered states of consciousness. And now we come to the heaviest and apparently most inescapable force of all. The seventh and heaviest of the forces revealed by Helena Blavatsky is known in ancient texts as Athonios, but let's call it the Lord of crystallized despair. This force operates through the feeling that you're forever trapped in limitations that are stronger than your will, older than your hope, more solid than your dreams. You know this influence when you feel that certain things in your life will never change. It's that inner voice that says, you've always been this way and always will be. Your family has always been dysfunctional. The world has always been unfair. You'll never get out of this situation. It's the force that crystallizes temporary patterns into permanent identities. The Lord of crystallized despair doesn't work through dramatic emotions. It works through heavy resignation, melancholic acceptance of limitations that seem unquestionable. It's like an invisible weight that makes any meaningful change seem impossible before you even try. This force manifests through beliefs about karma that have become fatalistic, through concepts about destiny that eliminate the possibility of free will, through ideas about heredity that make you believe you're condemned to repeat the patterns of your family or culture. Helena Blavatsky realized this force feeds on identification with temporary limitations. When you say I am anxious instead of I am experiencing anxiety, when you say I am poor instead of I am going through financial difficulties, you strengthen this force's power over your life. The result is a kind of spiritual paralysis where you can even recognize other possibilities, but feel incapable of accessing them. It's like being in a prison where you can see the sky through the bars, but believe the bars are indestructible. This seventh force is often the last to be overcome because it disguises itself as realism, as maturity, as spiritual acceptance. It whispers, being spiritual means accepting your limitations, when actually being spiritual means transcending limited identifications. Liberation from this heaviest influence comes through remembering that you are not your circumstances, not your history, not even your habitual patterns of thought and behavior. You are the consciousness that observes all of this, and this consciousness is free by nature. How can these revelations from Helena Blavatsky help you completely transform your relationship with these forces? Helena Blavatsky didn't just identify these seven forces in ancient Gnostic texts. She also discovered the liberation code that true Gnostics used to free themselves from this invisible prison. This code isn't a complicated technique or elaborate ritual. It's something much simpler and at the same time more radical, remembering who you really are. The secret Helena Blavatsky found is that these seven forces only have power over you while you identify with limited aspects of yourself. They can't control your true essence, only the masks you wear, only the roles you believe you're obligated to perform. When you remember that you are pure consciousness observing experiences and not the experiences themselves, something fundamental changes in your relationship with these forces. They can influence your thoughts, your emotions, your circumstances, but they can't touch the observer of those thoughts, those emotions, those circumstances. This is the first step of the liberation code. developing the ability to observe your own mental and emotional processes without completely identifying with them. It's like becoming the director of your life's movie, instead of just an actor who got lost in the character. The second aspect of the code is what Helena Blavatsky called discernment between the real and the unreal. The seven forces operate through illusions that seem absolutely real while you're under their influence. But when you develop the ability to question the reality of your own perceptions, you begin to see through the veil. The third element is what the Gnostics called gnosis, direct knowledge that doesn't depend on external sources. When you learn to access your own inner wisdom, you become independent of any external control system. It's like discovering you have a source of pure water inside your house and no longer need to buy bottled water from dubious suppliers. Helena Blavatsky realized this code can't be taught just intellectually. It needs to be lived, experienced, embodied. It's a gradual awakening process that happens through constant practice of self-observation, questioning of limited beliefs, and cultivating connection with your true nature. And the most surprising discovery she made is that once you begin applying this code, the very forces that once imprisoned you begin transforming into allies of your evolution. We've reached the end of this journey of revelations that Helena Blavatsky left us as her legacy. And the most extraordinary discovery she made is that these seven forces are not your permanent enemies. They are aspects of your own psyche that, when understood and consciously integrated, transform into powers of spiritual evolution. When you stop resisting these forces and begin understanding them, something magical happens. The architect of illusion transforms into the builder of conscious realities. The lord of false hierarchies becomes the organizer of liberating structures. The guardian of sacred wrath evolves into the defender of compassionate justice. The master of golden seductions transforms into the creator of authentic beauty. The architect of mental confusion evolves into the illuminator of clear wisdom. The weaver of mystical illusions becomes the facilitator of genuine transcendent experiences. And the lord of crystallized despair transforms into the guardian of spiritual stability. This transformation doesn't happen through fighting, but through understanding. Not through denial, but through conscious integration. It's like discovering that the dragons guarding the treasure weren't monsters to be killed, but guardians to be understood and respected. Helena Blavatsky realized these forces exist within every human being as natural aspects of the psyche that become destructive only when operating unconsciously. When you bring the light of consciousness to these shadow aspects of yourself, they reveal their original evolutionary purpose. You who made it this far are a special person. Among millions of people living completely asleep under the influence of these forces, you're someone who woke up enough to seek understanding. This makes you a pioneer, a trailblazer of the territory of expanded consciousness. Now you have a responsibility, not just to yourself, but to all humanity. Every person who awakens contributes to collective awakening. Every soul that frees itself from these invisible prisons makes it easier for other souls to find the path of liberation. The knowledge you receive today isn't just information. It's an invitation to profound transformation. Helena Blavatsky risked her reputation and safety to bring these revelations to the Western world. Now it's up to you to honor this legacy by applying this knowledge in your own life. Share this video with people you feel are ready for this revelation. Leave a comment telling us which of these seven forces you recognize most clearly in your own life. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving knowledge that can transform your existence. Remember, you are not a prisoner of these forces. You are a being of light temporarily forgotten of your own nature. And now that you've remembered, nothing can stop you on your journey back home to your true divine nature.